Atovs, you like to describe average as Coldplay.
Yes,
never too high, never too low. It's kind of in between. Would it be fair if I described the UTSA defense and special teams as Coldplay?
Absolutely. But again, let me explain what I mean by that. Coldplay has some great music, so if you're a fan out there, don't come at me. But it's kind of middle of the road. I mean, you're going to sway to it, you're going to enjoy it, but it's not the kind of music that you're going to throw your hands up in the air and jump around and get really high and excited while you're listening to it. I mean, if you're a DJ and you're trying to get people to run to the dance floor, Coldplay is not the band that you're playing. Like, you're going with Mr. Brightside or Shut Up and Dance with Me. I mean, it's just
fine.
It's just fine. In more relevant terms, I doubt, as the team has been talking about putting their walk-up song and their personal triangles together, that Coldplay's on anybody's list. Bottom line, Coldplay has its moments. It gets the job done, but it's not the band you're rocking out to. Welcome to episode 135 of the Hail Married podcast. I'm Atovs, and I'm joined by my husband, the Tovs. We're excited to be back to preview UTSA's defense and special teams. Let's get started.
All right, Atovs, before we get into the UTSA defense and the Coldplay comparisons that we started out with, let's start talking about this UTSA special teams. We have a couple of key returning players, and Michael Petro and Cale Hogan, our place kicker and our punter, respectively. Petro was a red flag last year because we didn't know anything about him. He was a new kicker, so we were kind of struggling to figure out, like, what is he going to be like during the 2025 season? Well, yeah. What was he like? 85% on his field goal percentage, 17 of 20, a long of 45 yards, 56 of 56 from extra points, Atovs. Out of these stats, you can tell that while he was a question mark or a red flag, the guy just delivered.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, coming from a history of really good kickers with, Hunter and then Jarrett Sackett and then Tate Sandell, it was, like you said, this unknown. And I think in some ways, it's really hard to live up to some of those names and some of the consistency that they've had, but he did a great job, and certainly has proven himself and certainly should not be a question mark for any UTSA fans going into the season.
I mean, if you want to nitpick, he hasn't had a game-winning field goal or a game-tying field goal that, propels UTSA forward to win a game.
Yeah, like the Duplessis play in Memphis a couple of years ago, right?
Sure, and okay, so that's fine, but I don't know, Atos. Based on his stats and based on what we know of Petro, I think he would confidently kick that game tying or game winning field goal. So we're not worried about him. Cale Hogan, again, had a rough first season, and then last season was like, well, is he going to grow? Is he going to keep going? And of course, we have this love-hate relationship with Cale. Love the guy, but we hate to see him be on the field many times during a game.
Yeah, and again, filling really big shoes coming right after Lucas Dean, but I think when you looked back at kind of how Lucas started as well, you can see that there's a progression. And with Cale, he has steadily gotten better. And I would expect that in this season, again, he's going to continue to improve.
Yeah, I mean, 54 punts, an average of 45.7 yards. I mean, what else can you ask for? Oh, how about a long of 60 yards on a punt, 3 touchbacks? Maybe the touchbacks, again, like Petro, maybe the touchbacks are something you hope that he gets a chance to get more of. But, again, it's hard to argue with these key returning players, our kicking team. So let's talk about a new player who might be key in their success, and that is William Hodges, the long snapper from Jones College. Now, you had an experience with him at the signing day event.
Yeah, really nice guy. I think we might have shared this in our signing day episode, but, he was walking up to people kind of looking for a place to sit, and I saw him get turned down once or twice. So walked up to him, felt bad for him, and got him a seat sitting next to a lovely donor who sits next to us in the basketball games for women's basketball. Got him introduced and set aside. And so hopefully he seemed a little, shy, but very polite. So, looking for good things from him.
Yeah, and I mean, no bad snaps at Jones College based on his stats, and which is great. However, now he has to face the Alamo Dome at home, where there's much more noise than there was at Jones College. He has to go on the road and have to deal with opposing fans. So that transition from Jones College to here is going to be big. And the quicker that he assimilates, remember, there was an issue again in the Texas State game in the Dome where our long snapper snapped it away from Cale Hogan and we suffered a safety. And that was sort of like the snowball effect that began, UTSA's eventual loss to Texas State in the Dome. So, yeah, we're hoping for some big things here. But, just I think the best way to put it is we don't really want to hear his name much.
Exactly.
All right, another area to focus on in the special teams, as always, is just kick coverage. Based on the fact that, these guys have been around each other for a while, and these teams have, not just UTSA, but all these teams have been able to practice since January, since they were able to stabilize their teams around that time. I would imagine there's been more work on special teams, so we should be okay. But then again, Atos, we've got every single team has done this, so who knows how this goes? But I think getting them ready, we really do need to make sure that we watch out for this unit because that's really, to me, the biggest question mark for the special teams. All right, well, we said we're going to talk about the UTSA defense, and we are going right into it. Much like that offensive preview, though, I'd like to just talk about some numbers and just some of the analysis I saw from that defense. 2025, home versus road. We're going to just talk about conference games here. At home, this UTSA defense allowed about 22.5 points per game. On the road, they allowed 36. Turnovers, they forced a little over 2 at home, and it's an average of half a turnover on the road. And then we talked about this big with the offense. First half points allowed at home was 10.5. On the road, it was 18. So the big takeaways here, I think, right away is Atovs. I mentioned the turnovers. UTSA caused like 2 turnovers in 4 conference road games. For defense built on causing havoc, it severely lacked that on the road. 8 quarterback hurries, 5 sacks, and an interception versus Temple and Charlotte. But then you had 2 quarterback hurries, 2 sacks, and a fumble recovery versus North Texas and USF.
Yeah, I mean, we spent a lot of time last season talking about the fact that we weren't generating as many turnovers last season as we had in previous seasons, and how problematic that had been. So, hopefully this is something that gets addressed so it's not a talking point again this season.
Sure. And I'm glad you keep talking about the takeaways because in 2025, it also represented the greatest gap between home and road takeaways. Because when you add the offensive turnovers to these numbers, at home, UTSA was +2 in turnovers. On the road, they were -1.5, so really -2. You're talking about a 4 turnover, essentially, gap. That's huge. You're not going to win many road games if you're turning the ball over more than your opponent. So I wanted to look again, diving deeper into this trailer era. What can we find based on this defense? We know that Jess Lepp has been defensive coordinator for all but I think it was 8 games of that first 2020 season of Jeff Trailers. Mm-hmm. I didn't see very much variance in terms of the performance of the defense. Like the underlying metrics and everything are pretty much steady. There are some exceptions here in terms of obviously I just mentioned the road takeaways, the home and road takeaways, and just the inability to be able to get some of the pressure and stuff. The problem is that because the performance hasn't been so dramatically different throughout the seasons, unlike the offense where you started seeing issues rising, I think that just shows you how when we started out talking about Coldplay, like this is what this UTSA defense is. It's Coldplay. It's just fine. It's never going to be a powerhouse, but it's never going to be an abysmal defense. It's just going to be fine. It's just going to do its job.
All right, let's move on and talk about some of our key returning and new players that we're expecting to see this season on our defense. Technically, there are only 2 returning starters. And I say technically because to be considered a returning starter, you had to have started the majority of the games. So you have Ty Leonard and Owen Pee-wee really as the only 2 players who started 6 or more games last season. However, we do have 4 other players who have some good starting experience. Jamian Buxton, Brandon Tucker, Ja'Cavian Rogers, and Ahmad Chapman. And it was kind of interesting, before we get into each of the position groups, just to mention that Traylor talked preseason about how this year their recruiting was a little bit different when it came to, replacing some of these players. They looked more for some high character, team-oriented players, people who had playing time, didn't necessarily have to be at the D1 level, where he said in the past he was kind of purely chasing talent. So I think it's safe to say that, in the past, maybe Traylor was compromising on some things that tied to his culture and perhaps led to, some of these issues that we had on the road.
Yeah, it was, when we talked about this, obviously you said you clearly emphasized like the talent over that character, almost like a long time ago when it was the 5-star talent versus the 5-star culture. And I think as we really go through some of these players, I think we're going to be able to see that connection and just what's important for what Traylor has done in the recruiting.
Yeah. So let's get started with the secondary. In terms of returning players, one of those key returners is Ahmad Chapman. Some of his stats from last season are 13 total tackles, 9 solo tackles, a forced fumble, fumble recovery, and an interception. Pretty impressive considering he didn't really have a lot of playtime last season. He kind of came in really more towards the end of the season.
Yeah, and I think, you immediately jumped to maybe a Ja'Cavian Rogers as a key returning player, but while Ja'Cavian's great, I want to jump over to RJ Lester because to me, I think he's going to be key in how he is able to carve playing time in this season. He suffered what was a serious medical situation. I'm guessing that was before camp, but it was found during the process of him coming on to UTSA. And, at that point, it's less about football, more about his well-being. And, I think his speed and playmaking ability, if he's able to be on the field and really make an impact on this team, is really going to jump out. And, again, if we can figure out some of this, some pressure on the quarterback, it's just going to make these cornerbacks even better because they'll have opportunities to make plays.
Yeah, and from what we've heard so far about RJ, from the interviews, it sounds like he is everything that we expected him to be this season. So
Awesome.
We didn't really highlight anyone specific in the safety room. We do have some returners in Elijah Newell and Cam Upshaw, but both of those guys really got thrown into the fire last season.
Sure.
And I think they're going to need to make some big strides, but they're still relatively young players. So let's move on and talk about some of the new players. And, we just talked about Ahmad Chapman. Well, we have his brother, Assad Chapman, now officially joining the team. From San Bernardino Valley Junior College. He had 2 tackles, 33 solo stops, 3 interceptions, one of which he returned for a touchdown, 2 fumble recoveries with 1 return for a touchdown, 4 pass breakups, and he helped lead San Bernardino Valley Junior College to a co-league championship. So, the challenge for him, of course, is going to be, how do you take that level of play up a notch from the JUCO level up to the FBS level? But if he's anything like his brother, I think we're going to be in good shape.
On the safety side, we have Nate Robinson Jr. He's coming from Marist on the FCS level. He registered 64 total tackles, 30 solo stops, 1.5 tackles for loss, 4 interceptions, 11 pass breakups, and a fumble recovery. Hey, Toves, one of the things that's interesting here is that I said he's from Marist, which is an FCS school, and it calls back to what you had started talking about with Jeff Traylor and how he changed his recruiting strategy, because we found, I think, a solid guy here to come and play here back in UTSA.
Yeah, and he's a local guy. Actually said he's planning on living at home this season and just kind of commuting into school. And it's sort of interesting because he is a player that Traylor passed on originally. And, Traylor's mentioned multiple times that his family will not let him, Nate's family will not let Traylor forget that he passed on him originally. I think it was either his mom or his grandmother, he said during their official visit, as they were walking around, they were like, yeah, I remember that from the last time we were here, before you said yes to my son.
Yeah.
So hopefully him coming back with that experience that he gained, even though it was at the FCS level, he'll be able to kind of add that veteran presence and experience to the safety room.
All right. Well, we've talked about sort of the back part of the defense. Let's talk about the front part of the defense, and that's the defensive line. Returning players. Well, I'm going to talk about the one player that I thought was going to be big this season. That was Johnny Bowens. He came off the ACL tear last season, and we thought, well, at some point he's just really going to pop. But I think he wasn't himself, and I thought, all right, this season's it, right? Like, maybe it takes about a couple seasons to really get back to who you are. And unfortunately, he is now out for the season. It's reported by Javi Cardenas. It's a tough moment because I really thought that with his talent level, it could really change some things on defensive line, especially for a line that is looking for depth and is looking, to restock itself after, just having lineman after lineman here that have been making tons of plays for UTSA's defense. So for me, then, outside of Bones, I'm going to go with Jamian Big Baby Buxton. I think that he's got the size and the ability to cause an offensive line problems. He made 14 total tackles and 5 solo. And of course that seems low, but that's not really his job on this defensive line. It's really for him to take up space. And so I think if he continues to take up space and, does that against all the opponents that we have on this schedule, we're going to be in a good spot, Atos.
Yeah, the other key returning starter is Ty Leonard, one of the 2 official returning starters. Ty was still kind of coming off of injury last season. I think now that he's fully healthy and he's had, some time to really recover and develop, I expect that we're going to see his game taken up another notch. We're also starting to see his leadership really flourish from the interviews that we've seen so far and just from the things that we've heard in the program about him.
I mean, I like Ty Leonard too, but I just wanted to just highlight Big Baby just because I love saying Big Baby, and I knew that you would talk about Ty Leonard. So let's talk about a new player, though, that has come into the mix, and that is Jeremiah Bailey from Eastern Kentucky. He played 38 games out at Eastern Kentucky. He accumulated 105 tackles, 14 tackles for loss, and 6 sacks. Look, Atos, once again, we got a guy that's going to have to be able to take up some space. And though I think he's a little bit undersized, I think we're going to be in a good spot with Jeremiah Bailey, especially if he's able to provide, some key snaps, especially providing that depth that now with Johnny Bowens out, we're going to need.
Yeah, and he was really successful, at the FCS level. He was named as second team All United Athletic Conference last year. So if he can translate some of that success to the FBS level, I think we'll be in good shape.
I agree. All right. Well, let's get to the middle of the defense, and that's the linebacker position. We've grouped a lot of guys in here because it's always tough. Like, do you bring some of these off? Do you bring some of these outside linebackers and put them on the line because technically they're coming off the edge, or how do you do it? Well, we've just lumped everybody together here if they're close to a linebacker position, and that's how we're going to talk about it. So, key returning player for me is Brandon Tucker. 39 total tackles last season, 25 solo, and a forced fumble. Here's the thing about Brandon Tucker. We talked to him a couple seasons ago when he first came on at the signing day event. One of the things that just really stuck out to me was the fact that he just seemed polished. He seemed much more mature than what his age probably was.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what I saw on the field was every bit of what I think that UTSA was looking for, and that was just steady, good play. And I think if he continues to grow, and he will, and plays that linebacker position as well as I think he can play it, hey Toes, we're gonna be good.
Yeah, I mean, he's got some big shoes to fill, though, coming in and taking the spot of Shad Banks after, Shad really came in and just had a remarkable season last year.
Yeah.
But he'll be playing alongside our other returning starter, Owen Pee-wee, who has now changed positions. So that's a little bit of an interesting twist. Owen's been playing that money backer position the last couple of seasons, and now he'll be a middle linebacker. From what we've heard during interviews, it sounds like he's adjusting well to that position. I think he's going to kind of be a bit of an X factor, though.
Sure.
If he has a good season and he and Brandon really work well together, it could be the makings of something really great. But again, you always have to understand making that kind of change late in your career. It's an adjustment. So, I'm anticipating there's probably going to be some glitches along the way. Well, and replacing Owen kind of in that lead money backer position is Bryce Grays. He had 22 total tackles last season, a sack, a forced fumble. He's looking to have a really great senior season. He also, off field, recently got married to former UTSA softball player Caden Ledbetter. So congratulations to Bryce. And hopefully that gives him some stability and motivation to really cap off this last season well.
He seemed really excited about the marriage, and then like getting a chance to go, I think, off season on their honeymoon. So wish them all the best, and wish him definitely the best this season as he takes over that money backer position. On the outside linebacker position, we really don't have anybody returning. Like that was some big losses, but we do have Cam Cooper, who at some point will come back. I think again, we talked about Johnny Bowens and some of the issues that he had returning from an ACL. So hopefully Cam is going to take, some precautions and be able to at least kind of ease in back into the lineup. Now, some new players for us to talk about are Elijah Baldwin from UTEP and Dylan Spencer from Texas Tech. We chose both of these guys because this duo is going to need to come in and fill some shoes on the pass rushing side, Toes.
Yeah, and Elijah Baldwin, he's kind of an interesting guy to look at. His physical stats are just fairly unusual for his position. He's 6'7", 230 pounds. That is really a lot of height for an edge rusher, not what you would typically see.
Sure. And with him, there's also the fact that he's a finesse pass rusher, which also makes sense that he's 6'7", 230. So again, do we see him maybe on the line at times? Or, is he still going to be doing more of the kind of outside linebacker position at UTSA? I mean, we just threw him in here. We think that he'll be playing outside linebacker and doing that, and probably at a high level. With Dylan Spencer, he's really got more of the stats that you're probably going to find on that outside linebacker position at 6'5", 245 pounds. Just a highly rated high school recruit, but was injured in the preseason of his, redshirt freshman year. And so he didn't really get to play a lot, Toes.
Yeah, I mean, if you look him up at Texas Tech, you're not really going to see, a lot of stats. But I think, again, what the staff was likely looking for him is that he has more of that prototypical physique for this position. And, just with the production that he had in high school, I think they're hoping that that's ultimately going to translate once he gets on the field at UTSA.
Absolutely. And with the guy like him, he's a power pass rusher. So that's why we wanted to highlight both players. You got a power pass rusher and then a finesse one. So that kind of interchangeable, that different styles gives the defense a different look for offenses to have to take on.
Well, that kind of leads us into some of the questions that we still have now that we've talked about some of the key players that we expect to see on the field. One of the questions that we had last season, I think we continue to have a little bit this season, is how are we going to generate that pass rush without blitzing?
Well, I mean, the defense is predicated on just that blitzing and then just kind of causing havoc. So, even when they blitz, they had some problems getting to the quarterback. So it's just going to be more of how does Jess Lepp tweak this defense in order to get these guys closer to touching that opposing quarterback. If they're able to generate that pass rush, whether it's blitz, however you want to do it, we need it in order to cause some of those takeaways, whether it's at home or on the road. So it's going to be key for us to get that pass rush going.
Yeah, I think one of the other biggest overarching questions for this defense is knowing how many new guys we have coming in. Are they really going to be able to gel as a unit, particularly at the beginning of the season when we, head to Texas State in the second game? I mean, what are your thoughts on kind of how they're going to handle just becoming a team and not individual players?
I think they're going to gel as a unit. I think they're going to be fine. But again, historically, this defense has always been fine, right? Like, it's always had talent and it's always just performed at a certain level. So as long as this defense comes out and it performs at that level again, which is, I think, a given, again, we're going to be fine. And
Yeah.
I'm going to keep using that word. We're fine. We're Coldplay fine.
Yeah, the other thing that, Trailers talked a little bit about to help them kind of understand each other in the preseason was, working on these individual triangle of toughness that they've created. So everyone's going to have kind of their own triangle in their locker room, and, they get to present and kind of talk about like their history, their heroes, their walk-up song, the things that motivate them, so that hopefully that will help them to understand each other as well. So it remains to be seen, how that'll all play into it. But I think it'll be interesting to look back at the end of the season and see what, if any, of these things and these tactics really worked.
Yeah, I agree.
The other, I think, question that we've continuously had when it comes to our secondary is, can they clean up the communication and really make sure that they're not having missed assignments in that secondary? And, one of the comments that came up in a preseason interview was from David Amador. And he said, if we can clean up our communication, our secondary will be great. And on the one hand, it's good to hear him say that. But on the other hand, the fact that you have a wide receiver calling out communication issues is a little disconcerting.
Well, especially because then we listen to some of the secondary talk and they're like, oh no, our communication's great. So maybe some self-reflection from the secondary, maybe some, listening to what Amador has said, because especially from a wide receiver position, they're going to be able to tell if that secondary cannot hand off their assignments to each other. So to me, again, you're going to see it's going to look great versus some teams. It's going to look really weak against some other teams. In the end, it's just how just average Jess operates. Like, as much as we want to, harp on the fact of what is average, what is Coldplay, it's Jess Lepp, right? Like, it's just his teams are going to be fine. His communication is going to be okay, but it's going to break down probably at some inopportune times. So, Toes, it's the fact that we're this deep into the trailer era and we're still talking about this, as you kind of alluded to. I don't know that there's ever going to be a true fix.
Yeah. A couple other call outs of things that we heard from camp and interviews. Since we did our offensive preview, we were anticipating at that point that Ben Rios was going to be our center. But we have since learned that Luke Lopez is healthy enough that he's able to come back and return as the starting center. And so Ben Rios is shifting back to guard. So a little bit interesting, on the one hand, we talked a lot about that continuity and consistency with Owen and Ben Rios. Now you're introducing Luke Lopez again, although, Owen and Luke have worked together in the past. But I think, it's a good thing because Luke is one of those guys that has been talked about as having really great communication and really great leadership. So now you have Luke in that starting center role, but you also have Ben Rios, who also, has learned how to see some of those, things that you have to look at as a center, where the defense is at, the lineups. So I think having two of them, on the line is just really going to make the line stronger.
I agree. It's really going to be stronger. And, we talked about how smart Ben Rios is, and Luke Lopez is just, I would say, as intelligent, especially football wise. You mentioned, some of the calls that Luke Lopez has made, and it feels like you got unexpected depth, even though we knew that he could be there. it just feels, I think, a little bit more reassuring now that that's happening, even though it's a different offense, but still, yeah, I mean, I'm feeling a little bit better about that offensive line.
The other interesting thing that we heard related to the offense this week was when they interviewed Will Henderson, they were asking him about the new offense and what he thought about it. And he made kind of an interesting comment. He said, that this offense was really easy to understand. And unlike last year, where they constantly had to look at the sideline, and then when they looked at the sideline, they wondered sometimes, like, what are they trying to do, or what does this mean? He said it's so much easier now because I don't really have to think, I can just play. And again, I really wish someone would have asked him a follow-up about that. But, it does just kind of illustrate what we thought we knew about Burke's offense and some of the struggles that we were having there.
Yeah, during the preview, we talked quite a bit about how it was complex, and we gave some examples of that. So for me, I think I shouldn't say just for me, but I think for all UTSA fans, there's got to be much more reassuring that this offense is going to run much smoother than it has in the past.
Absolutely. Traylor also alluded to some injuries that we haven't necessarily heard about. He said some of them were concerning. Certainly we learned about Johnny Bowens this week from his Instagram, but it sounds like there might be one or two more that might crop up unexpectedly, as happens every season.
Before we go, let's talk some UTSA soccer. We enjoyed having Coach Pittman on the pod last week to preview this 2026 season for the UTSA soccer team. And, as much as we joke with each other about the styles of play, sure, I do like the passing. I enjoy more of at times, east-west type of game, and he's more north-south. But I do recognize that going more north-south at times, depending on the opponent or depending on, the weather, that it fits. And, I again, we go back and forth with that. He really has kind of given me a hard time about it at times. But what I can't deny is just how tough and resilient his teams always are.
Yeah, and speaking of tough and resilient, UTSA started the season with 2 games where we tied 2-2 in each game. The first was against Texas State, the second against number 6 TCU. And in both of those games, the Roadrunners conceded a goal to the opponent in the first half, and they had to be resilient and come from behind.
Well, let's start out with Texas State then, because both of those goals were self-inflicted errors that really cost UTSA. The first one was an own goal, just a bad deflection right past Jasmine Kessler. And then the second one was actually a great free kick by Texas State, but UTSA allowed that ball to bounce in the box and never were able to actually clear that ball. And because of it, it found a Texas State player and they put it away. Those things are going to be prevalent in early season games, but those are things that at least for a goalkeeper, a former goalkeeper like Derek Pittman, is going to drive him nuts.
Yeah, but let's talk about the goals that we actually made. That first goal from BB, she was fouled in the box and got a penalty kick, and fortunately was able to deliver on that opportunity. And the second goal came off of a free kick from Leah Varela. The kick kind of went through a crowd, and Dulcie Benz was able to redirect it past the keeper and into the goal.
Yeah, and it sounds like, it was, there was just some unorthodox ways for us to score, but, sometimes it's not always going to be pretty. And Derek Pittman talks about that a lot. It's not always going to be pretty. But something that was pretty was at times some of those passing sequences that they had in this game. UTSA moved the ball around, and it seemed like they did it a few times was they would go up midfield, up to the forwards, and then bring it back to the back line. And once that short pass came right back to the back line, they would send it forward in a very much longer pass like they have in the past. But this one was, you had a forward streaking ahead, and that's how that first goal by BB was set up. It came back to Sophia Peters. She sends it long. She finds BB streaking towards the goal, and defender had no other opportunity to make a play, so they just fouled BB, and that's how we got that penalty kick. And again, this UTSA team is known for really outshooting its opponents. In this game against Texas State, they outshot them 13-7, 7-2 on goal. And they won the possession 54-46, but that type of possession is just kind of nominal. It means that this was a evenly balanced teams. And let's be honest, Texas State is the defending Sun Belt tournament champions, much like UTSA is the defending American Conference champion. So this wasn't like it was going to be some sort of unevenly matched game.
Yeah, I mean it's a rivalry. It's two conference champions from last season playing each other, and in true rivalry form, this game was extremely physical, a little chippy at times. There were somewhere around, I think, 7 yellow cards that were given. Both coaches received a yellow card. So this kind of tells you how physical, how serious, and at times how frustrated these players were with the game and with each other.
I do want to call out two Texas State players, though. Midfielder Matsuri Tsusui. She was actually very tough for UTSA to handle. Now, for the most part, they kind of kept her under wraps, but there were some times where she had some just terrific dribbling displays, and her passing, especially that free kick that she had, was just. I gotta say, I mean, that was just terrific. I know it's a rival and we want to hate their players, but you can't hate on the quality that she showed out there. But I think the one player that everybody's going to mention for Texas State is midfielder Helen Alumenu. Um, to say that she was going back and forth with the crowd and kind of just playing to that instead of really paying attention to the game would be kind of minimizing things. I mean, she was, but she also had a lot of great quality out on the field. So I just think that what it really came down to is just her using some of her theatrics and a little bit of flopping that earned some, kicks that really got the crowd kind of. I guess the best way to put it is maybe ready to throw some things down on the
Oh
field.
yeah, I mean there were chants of like give her a red card, and people were very frustrated with her. So she certainly did get in the heads of the UTSA fans, probably more so than even the players.
And she was talking a lot when they were up, but as UTSA tied the game, there was no more chirping back and forth with the crowd or acknowledging the crowd. It was more, I'm going to have to be, now I got to pay attention, right?
Yeah.
And never was that more evident too late in the game.
Yeah, I mean, BB had an opportunity right at the end of the game to score. It just wasn't meant to be. She unfortunately hit the top of the goalpost. I mean, if that ball had come in maybe 2 inches lower, we'd be having a very different conversation right now.
And we'd be saying some different things about Helen.
Probably.
A lot of talking and nothing, right? But that's just the way things went. And, Coach Pittman kind of talked post game about, what he thought initially about some of the things they needed to work on and some of the good things they did during the game. But one thing that caught my eye, or my ear, I guess is the best way to put it, is they needed to execute their set pieces much cleaner. And I thought UTSA, I mean, they did score one goal off that set piece with Leah Varela and Dulcie Benz. But if you really take the entire game into account, you do remember some corner kicks and some other opportunities where things just look kind of rusty, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, first week of the season. So that kind of leads us into TCU.
Yeah. We played number 6 TCU in Fort Worth. Again, a 2-2 draw. This game was different, even though the result was the same. It was a different style of game. TCU outshot UTSA 20-7. They had 8 shots on goal to our 2, and they really dominated the time of possession, 62 to 38.
But it was still another resilient game from UTSA because, as you mentioned earlier, UTSA fell behind 1-0 at halftime. There was a free kick from TCU, and it had our defense scrambling, and they were able to put that goal away. And because of it, I thought, okay, that might be it. There's no chance. I think we're doing a lot of running around, and I don't know that we have the energy, especially in 99-degree heat that they had out there at. It was like 8 o'clock in the evening, and you're like, are you kidding me? It's 99 degrees. It's that hot up there. And, the players just looked like they were just sweating buckets. But Atovs, in the second half, in the matter of like 3 minutes, 2 quick strikes from UTSA. And what happens here? Well, first one is off a free kick by Jasmine Kessler. Kessler and your long free kicks. Those may be some of the saviors this season, but she sent that ball long, and a lot of confusion on the TCU defense. They kind of stumbled around each other, kind of tripped each other. It fell to the feet of Aaliyah Durden, and Aaliyah did not hesitate. She took that first-time shot, sent it right past the goalie. There was calls for a push from UTSA, but if you look at the replay, there was nothing that happened. It, like I said, just confusion from TCU, and we took advantage of some of their inexperience in the back to get that goal. And then like 3 minutes later, we get a corner kick. Here we go, another set piece, Atos. Leah Varela with a great corner kick right to Addie O'Kelly. Addie O'Kelly heads it right to Ava Jackson, and she just redirects that pass right past the goalkeeper and the defender on the goalpost. So it was just beautiful. Like I know that you want to get some goals just by the way of play, but the way that this UTSA team put these kind of plays together and executed on those set pieces. Remember, I just said that's what Coach Pittman wanted to execute in a better fashion going into this game, and I thought they did.
Full disclosure, I did not get to watch the first part of this game. As I drove home, I get inside the house, right at the front door, there's Toves telling me, oh my God, we're up 2-1 against TCU. Like, you've got to watch this game. We were just so excited for where we were at that point. You know, unfortunately, towards the end of the game, the girls really started to get tired. You know, they were absorbing a lot of pressure from TCU. They were doing a lot of running. And, you know, unfortunately, TCU was able to make that game tying goal. And once again, you know, kind of similar to what we talk about with Texas State, the ball bounces around and we just couldn't clear it, get it out of the way. And unfortunately, you know, they got the equalizer.
Yeah, but all's not bad here. A 2-2 tie against number 6 TCU in Fort Worth, as you said, starting out this little segment. It's the first result versus a ranked opponent for UTSA in a true road game in its entire soccer history. This is really big. It was really a big game. I really thought that it was going to be maybe a close loss, 1-0, maybe a last second goal, make it 2-0 TCU. But just the way this team played and played for each other, and I thought really played for the name on their chest, right? UTSA. It was really a great result. Let's move over though. Some of these issues that we had during the games were a result of, you know, really some communication errors, Atovs. You know, we talk about the ball kind of bouncing around. We talk about some of the issues that happened with this team, and it's because this team is shorthanded. There's a lot of injuries on this UTSA team. So to look back at both of these games and say 2-2 ties, you'll take them because they could have easily been 2 losses.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly on the defensive side and the kind of defensive midfield. You know, we have some players who haven't been able to get back on the field just yet. And so, you know, you're putting some players in some different positions or some younger players in positions that are really key. So you expect that you're going to have those kind of growing pains in your first couple of games.
And I always love how Derek Pittman talks about it. He's like, they're always going to, you know, TCU and Texas State, they're going to ask a lot of questions of us. He loves to say that. And I think they answered a lot of questions, but I think even for both games and even with some of the inexperience, you got to be excited that they do have plenty to build on. Like, it's not all bad. Like, there's some bad here, but a lot of that to me is fixable. And it's just going to take a little bit of time, a couple more games for them to get there. But I will say, unfortunately, a player that I was big on, Shay Ryan, one of our forwards, was injured exhibition game at A&M Corpus Christi, and she announced via Instagram that she is out for the season. So that's a big blow for the offense. You know, Coach Pittman wanted to be a little more offensive this year because there were injuries in the back line, and so he was hoping that the offense could carry this team early on, or at least through the season. But unfortunately, a hit like that, it'll challenge us, I think, offensively.
Yeah, we also believe Jalen Bracamonte, the backup keeper, may also be out for the season. She was on crutches at the Texas State game. She apparently got injured in that same exhibition game at Texas A&M Corpus Christi, and she had a brace on her knee. So it's very likely that she will be out for the season, just based on what we saw.
Yeah. Tough blows. Again, you know, you don't want to be losing all these players because, you know, it feels like they start multiplying as the year goes on, and you don't really want to see any of these girls miss some time. But back to some good news. Because of her performance against Texas State and TCU, Leah Varela was named American Conference Honorable Mention Player of the Week. I believe she had 2 assists and 3 shots on goal. Leah was the tough midfielder that I've talked about many times, and I was just really impressed with her coming up and stepping up. She's just a really good tough player, and you can't have enough of them. And big congratulations to Leah on this honor, and hopefully more to come because it's just week one, right? So, speaking of which, next two games here at Park West. Thursday at 7:30 against Colorado College. They are a Division I school, so please do not confuse yourself. I know it says Colorado College, but they are in the Mountain West. Last year, we played them at their own home field, and we tied 0-0. So I'd love to see them come back and, maybe get a couple goals scored on them, just to remind them that UTSA is a powerhouse. And then next Sunday, we have St. Mary's coming to Park West at 7:30, which is great because both of these games are going to be in the evening, which is going to be much cooler. But hopefully, again, we're able to maybe start generating some more offense and put some of these games away early so that we can get some rest and really recover for some tough games coming up.
All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up for us. So thanks for joining us at the Hail Married podcast. I'm A Toves.
And I'm the Toves.
We'll be back soon with some more preseason football thoughts and some updates on soccer.
Birds up.